Alright, so since there's two of you, I'm just going to kind of hold the mic in between, and hopefully it picks you up both fine. If you could just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background.
My name is Dan Welk. And I have my own theme music.
Hello. Yes.
He is Swiss so it works here.
Going back and asked to, I'm out of time right now. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine.
Turn it off now.
Well, if you need it, just leave it in.
It's on right now.
You can step out and take a call, whatever you do. So I'm Dan Welk, and plant manager at the Linwood Water Plant. The North Point pumping station where we're currently at is under my responsibility to operate and maintain. What else would you like?
How about a little bit of your childhood growing up?
My childhood?
Yep.
Oh, grew up in the Milwaukee area, actually the suburbs, Oak Creek and Franklin, and went to school, EWM, for 3 years, then eventually to MATC, got a 2-year degree in water and wastewater treatment, and started working with the city in 1986 in the water department. Finished off my 4-year degree in 1999 at Carroll University, and I've been working with the city water department since then, and been a manager since 1999.
And if you could introduce yourself and background and
My name's John Schmidt. I'm the maintenance manager for the water department. I worked at Linwood for most of my career. I work now at the Howard treatment plant. My childhood, I was born and raised in Milwaukee, lived my entire life here. I've lived all over the city, even lived on the east side on Lake Drive for a while. I went to school here in town. I don't have a degree, but I went to UWM, MATC, WCTC, and general education in water treatment, and a lot of maintenance background. That's about it. I've worked for the water department since 1980, and I started with the city in '78.
could either of you tell me a little bit of the history of the pumping station here and the water tower?
Well, I'll start, and you can interject if you've got anything to add. I don't know the exact years. In fact, the brochure that I gave you would have more details and information than I probably can give you, or will be a summary of that. But somewhere in the 1800s, they decided they wanted to start a water system here to transport water around the city as the city was growing. And they put it here because of its location. This is on the north point of the harbor, and they had an intake structure in 20 feet of water, a couple thousand feet out, and they drew water in, and they had a steam-operated pumping station here that would then pump the water into a series of water mains that then also filled the. In fact, I have that map in my car. Forgot about that. It filled the Kilbourne Reservoir, which was an equalizing reservoir, and then that distributed to whatever their distribution system consisted back in the day. Some of the original water mains were actually made out of logs. They would take tamarack or cedar, or some kind of fairly water-tolerant wood, core it out, and then use that as a water main. And we have dug up some of those over the years. So this was North Point. It was operated by steam, and it was a pumping engine. And this pumping engine was more or less a reciprocating type pump, and that involved kind of a piston action.
Positive
displacement pump. So that's why we have the tower. North Point Tower is basically a standpipe which takes out the surge of water with each stroke of a pump, so that the pressure in the pipes maintained a constant horizontal pressure and didn't have this surge. And the surge of the pump then would go up and down the standpipe. So the water level was free floating and would just move up and down that standpipe, so that it would take out any surges from the stroke, but then keep a constant steady pressure in the horizontal mains. So that was the original system. That was just lake water. Eventually they added another pumping station over on Humboldt and Chambers.
So
That's
this
called,
is the first pumping station?
this is the first major pumping station. And then due to expansion, they needed to add on, so they went to develop another pumping station of a similar design, a steam plant. That plant was located right on the Milwaukee River. It's called the Riverside Pumping Station. That was put in 1918. Operated in similar fashion. It was a steam plant, reciprocating pumps, and they used to get water right from Lake Michigan. And by this point, they were adding chlorine to the lake water because people were drinking the water and still getting sick and dying of cholera, typhoid, and some other waterborne diseases. They had put in a new intake for the Riverside location, and that was located on the lakefront but farther north of North Point, currently where the Linwood water plant is. So that intake also then provided an alternate source for this station, the old North Point, because the existing North Point intake was fairly small, fairly shallow, and would fill up with sand, and they were having problems with meeting demand. So they decided to put in a combined intake for this new station, Riverside, that also could supply extra water to the existing North Point station. And then there was quite a bit of argument and discussion over the years about adding water purification to the water treatment process. And there was a lot of debate that went on for a decade or more about whether or not they needed a water treatment plant, or did they just need to take care of the sewage. That was the problem. The lake was getting contaminated due to outfalls in the lake, sewage from the river, storm events. So people were drinking the water, even though it was chlorinated, they were still getting sick. So it went on for years debating whether or not you needed to build a water plant if they built a sewage plant. They hired at least 3 times that I've seen in the archived newspaper article clippings from back in the day. 3 times they hired experts to give them opinions on this, and each time the experts told them you need both, a water treatment plant and a sewage treatment plant. But it was very politically divided that you didn't need to waste the money on a water plant if you built a sewage plant. Or, if you built a water plant, did you really need a sewage plant? And again, many national experts were all making the same recommendation: you need both. I think it was finally authorized in the mid-30s to build the Milwaukee filtration water treatment plant, state of the art. And when they did so, within months after it finally was approved, there was another cholera outbreak, and like 35 people died or something like that. Again, proving that yes, we did need something like that. So then the Linwood plant was built at the location that was the intake location for Riverside and North Point, to take advantage of that as a source of the water to be purified. And they basically built a landfill on a site right on the lakefront that was, pilings were put in, and it was right off the shore, and they pumped the water out and started filling it, and then they reclaimed about 25 acres of land from the lake and turned that into the site for the Milwaukee filtration plant. So that plant was designed to do state-of-the-art water treatment, which at the time was fairly conventional, involved pumping the water, coagulating it, flocculating, sedimentation, filtration, chlorination, and what was also called chloramination, where they turned the chlorine into a more stable form by addition of ammonia. And interestingly enough, when they were doing a pilot study on what kind of a water plant to build there, they actually considered adding ozone as a disinfectant treatment, which was at the time very popular in Europe. But they thought it was cost prohibitive here, that it wasn't a very cost-benefit type system to put in. Again, years later, Milwaukee did add ozone in the 1990s due to a cryptosporidium outbreak. And that was kind of ironic that it was actually something considered in the 30s and not put in. And now we have it, and it's been very beneficial, the ozone. So the Linwood plant was installed and built and put into service around 1939. Then the water plant provided the water to these 2 pumping stations, and not just raw lake water. Now it was treated drinking water. So then the system expanded, the city grew, and we added more pumping stations. They added more booster stations around the city. We have a number of different boosting pumping districts. And eventually the Linwood plant couldn't keep up with the demand for the city, so they decided they needed another water plant. They did a study and decided to locate it on the south side of Milwaukee. This was done in the 50s, and then in 1959, I believe they started construction for the Howard water plant, which included a pumping station right on the lake near South Shore Park. That would be the water supply, and then they would pump it inland to a water treatment plant that was built at 6th and Howard. And again, that was a high point for the city. They thought they could take advantage of some of the elevation for pumping. So they put that station in to add another 100 million gallons per day to the city's capacity. Because in the 50s, they were dealing with having to have conserved water and I'm trying to remember the right word here. Not water shortages, but water restrictions. And they would tell people you can't water your lawns or do laundry because they were trying to keep up with demand. And the Linwood plant was running full bore, so they built another 100 million gallon per day plant on the south side. That went into service in 1962. And so now you have the two water plants, one at Linwood on the north side, one on the south side, the Howard plant. And those are the two major treatment plants. And then we have a variety of pumping stations. And then we have smaller booster stations and then elevated storage tanks and ground storage tanks for storing water and repumping as needed to keep pressure throughout the district. Anything you want to add?
No, that's pretty much it.
You were saying that when the North Point station was first built, that it was like a piston mechanism.
Yep.
And that the water tower needed to be built to deal with the fluctuation.
Right.
Was that the latest technology at the time, or
It
was there
was.
another way to do it that didn't need the water tower?
From what I read, and again, you'll have the brochure there you can look at. I know when they built Riverside, those were like state-of-the-art, most efficient steam-operated pumps that were available at the time. They were like award-winning. That was in 1918. And so I would imagine before then, which is what the North Point time frame was, that was the way to go, was to use steam. You know, there wasn't electrical, we didn't have the electrical grid like we have now. So that must have been the most efficient way to use coal to fire up steam, and the steam created heat, and the steam ran the pumps, the pumping engines. The water turning could turn converters to generate electricity for the building needs. So it was kind of self-sufficient once you had the coal.
But it wasn't a high-speed pump, so part of when you went to electrical pumps and motors turn at higher RPM, and then you can have a centrifugal pump. But with the steam generation, you have this slower positive displacement pump.
And again, some of this is our speculation on it. You know, we're not experts on this. What was the state of the art for pumping systems in the 1880s or 90s or whatever? So I think when you read some of the articles we gave you, some of that's in there.
Linwood was built with a pump room that could have had, it's large enough to have the steam pumps, but it was built with the electric pumps in the 30s. So it changed, from the 20s to the 30s.
Do you know when they were building the new plants in the 30s, was that, obviously it was the Depression, was that a way to find jobs for people in Milwaukee?
That's a good question. I know
Linwood was part of the WP programs.
it was part of the Public Works Administration program, which John Gerda, who's a historian, right? You've heard of him. He was talking about, he had a really nice presentation at the Harlem Museum a number of weeks or months ago as part of Clean Rivers, Clean Lakes. And he talked about how the Linwood plant was not a WPA project. It was a Public Works Administration project, which I'm not quite sure if it had the same intent to put people to work. The Linwood plant was being debated for 10 years before the Depression hit. So it was still something that had been considered for years and years. And finally, the politicians decided and approved it at a cost of $4.5 million. It was then they decided to use the Public Works Administration agency to help build this public works. I don't think it was built with the intent to put people to work. You know what I mean? or a lot of
Yeah.
WPA projects or public work projects to help build up public infrastructure, but also put people to work. This is just my understanding of it. I'm not an expert on it, and I could be wrong, but
It just happened to be at the same time.
because Linwood was being considered, Milwaukee filtration plant was being considered for a decade before the Depression hit. So I don't think it was built exclusively to put people to work. It was a hotly debated topic for many years. So,
Okay. And then the current plant was built, what year did you say?
the existing structure we're in right now is the North Point pumping station, and it's at least the second facility on this site. And this was put into service 1960, 61. It was built during the height of the Cold War. So I don't know if you noticed, we came through how thick the doors were. They were big, thick, steel, heavy doors. It was designed to withstand a nuclear blast. Again, why it doesn't have any windows and it looks like a bunker. It also had some civil defense considerations when it was built. I'm thinking 60, 61, maybe 62. There was a number of improvements done in the waterworks at that time. That was also the same time the Howard plant was built. North Point, this new North Point station was designed and built. And then we had the Grange station, which was designed and built. And I don't know if Florist was a part of that. Grange is a pumping station.
I don't think Florist was quite that old because it's not a bomb shelter like Grange. Grange is built like a bomb style shelter style.
And all three of those facilities resemble each other. They have the same red brick, kind of bunker looking design. So the Texas Avenue pumping station, the Howard water plant, the Howard pumping station, which is at Howard, all were in the Grange pumping station, were all built in the early 60s, and part of that thought process when it came to designing.
And I think the North Point plant completely replaced the old building.
Yes. Yeah, the old building was inefficient. It was still coal-fired. This was electrical, state-of-the-art, much more compact. The existing, this structure actually had more pumping capacity than the old building did because those old pumps were just not as efficient and they just took up so much room. Again, because you saw those pictures, they were 3 stories tall or more and very big, took up a lot of footprint. Where here, you can see what we've got, they're fairly compact compared to what those were.
And the new station didn't need the standpipe and water tower, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you know, at that point, was there ever a desire to just tear down the water tower?
I think by then it had probably been designated as with historical, like a National Registry of Historical Sites, or certainly being considered. And that was, actually we have those prints of that when that was done. That was around the time that they were, that was after. I think that historical designation happened like in 1968. And I don't think there was any thought of ever tearing it down back in the day because it was an icon. It was designed specifically to be structurally pleasing. Because basically, as you've seen in the inside, it's nothing more than a 4-foot, 3-foot diameter steel pipe, 100-some feet tall. You needed to do something with it. And I think it was also modeled after the water tower in Chicago. I think it was designed by the same architects who did the water tower in Chicago, part of their water utility, which served the same function. Yeah, it was designated Milwaukee Landmark in 1968, and in 1969 was selected as one of the 5 landmarks in the U.S. by the American Water Works Association. So that all happened, this historical designation, after the old station was torn down. Because this station was in service in 1962, and I'm sure they began demolition of the old station fairly soon thereafter. So,
Do you know what anything about the neighborhood's response to the pumping station was, whether they liked it or whether they thought it was an eyesore?
no idea. I'm not sure. I haven't seen anything about it when it was constructed. I don't recall seeing any newspaper clippings or anything. So.
The Altera building, Altera on the lake, that was part of the water system too, correct?
It was not.
Do you know what that building was?
Yes, that's a flushing station.
Okay.
And that was put in, again, I'm guessing at the numbers, sometime in the early 1900s, maybe the late 1800s. And again, if you go there, the whole history is listed there. And the intent for that was to take Lake Michigan water, which was cleaner, and then pump it upstream of the Milwaukee River to help flush out the Milwaukee River. Because the Milwaukee River would get stagnant and it was so polluted. And so this was a way to flush out. That's why it's the Milwaukee Flushing Station.
Clean up the rivers. There actually were two pumping stations, Altera and was the other one the Horny Cove? But there's also on the south side, there was one for the river on the south side to flush out
the KK River. So it's still, that tunnel's still there somewhere.
I believe so, because they
They're
were
talking about
repurposing that tunnel. I forget what
We're considering it.
Right.
To be a part of the deep tunnel project for the sewage district. So Altera, which is now the coffee station, was the Milwaukee Flushing Station, Milwaukee River Flushing Station, and that pump still works. And at the time, it was a 500 million gallon per day, I think it still is, 500 million gallon per day centrifugal pump. And it was one of the largest in the world at the time when they put it in. Again, this is my memory from reading the displays there. And it still functions, it still works.
All the equipment is there in operation, and you can see it when you go there.
And that building sat more or less abandoned or in disrepair for years until someone came up with this concept of putting in a coffee shop in it and repurposing the building. And I mean, I know when I started here driving by there, it was just kind of dilapidated and run down. And then all of a sudden you saw them blasting the Cream City brick and you saw all kinds of work. Like, what's going on there? But it was not a part of the Milwaukee Water Works at all. It was always a part of the sewage district.
Has there been any effect on like the lakefront, the beach area with the pumping station? Has the level of the lake been changed at all because of it?
Because of our pumping station?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of, no. Again, we're drawing water from, thousands of feet away from shore at a 60-foot depth. And this original structure, was drawing, in fact, it used to be called Love Rock. It was the curb structure that was out here on the lake. That was a part of the original North Point station. I don't know if you've seen anything about Love Rock. So I don't think we would have impacted the lake levels all that much. Back in the day, maybe when they first put the station in, they were pumping, I'm guessing, 20 million, 10 million gallons a day. When you've got how many trillions of gallons out of Lake Michigan. The lake levels are significantly more impacted by, climate and weather, and now they're talking about, the St. Clair River dredging and things like that, than anything we would do.
And Milwaukee's also part of the watershed for Lake Michigan, which would, as the water's used and sent to a treatment plant, sewage treatment, it would be returned to the lake.
A significant amount, if not most of what we pump and treat gets returned to the lake, except for what gets lost in evaporation if someone's watering or leakage. But again, if it's in the basin, it's all going to come back. Or product that's shipped out of our area, bottled water. But most of what we treat and send through our mains comes back to the lake.
You said that some of the old water mains used to be made out of trees. Have you, do you know, are any of them, like when it was the latest that some of those were still in use?
I think there might even be some in use still. They're not sure, but
occasionally they still will go to repair a main in a section of town. I don't know the last time they found one, but it isn't that long ago that they have found and repaired wooden mains in the street.
And I'm not sure if it's in our records of where the tamarack or cedar mains, if they still exist, but I know it wasn't that long ago they dug some up. I know for sure Laura has one in her office from the 1980s.
Yeah.
And again, it's a fairly good size, but the actual water, the diameter, inside diameter is fairly small. So I mean, it took a pretty good, trunk, and then they only had maybe an inch and a half, 2-inch internal diameter, so it didn't transport a lot of water. But we did hear when they pulled them out, they were in really good shape. Again, if they're within the ground, and they're
No oxygen getting to them, and so they don't deteriorate.
You said that you used to live up on Lake Drive?
Yes.
How long were you up there?
3 to 4 years maybe.
And when was that from?
That would have been 84 to 88. Would have been 1984 to 1988. I lived not far from Lake Park, and it was the third floor. We rented a third floor of the house, and it originally had been a ballroom for that when it was originally a single-family house.
So living in that neighborhood, did you get a sense of the type of community that was there? Was there a strong sense of community within?
It was a very nice community to live in. Actually, the owners of the house at that time would have had a neighborhood group of people that would just come to have dinner and coffee, and we went to it a couple of times. It was very nice, and they were socially conscious kinds of people and meetings that they had there.
Do you recall any of the neighborhood's feelings about the bluff or the lake or Bradford Beach?
They appreciated it. I mean, part of the thing that attracted to a lot of the people of the neighborhood was being on the lakefront, having a park right there, the whole lakefront, whether it was the beaches or, that's what attracted the people to those neighborhoods. It was very nice. I mean, I could walk out the door and walk across the street, and I was at a golf course. It was just a pitch and putt, but it was very nice.
I've heard some accounts that some of the residents in that area were upset about creating a beach and the Lincoln Memorial Drive that sort of took away from their access to Lake Michigan. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard anything like that?
That would have been a long time ago, because even Bradford Beach has been in there a long time, so that wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have known any of the residents that would have been upset about that. That would have been, and the people I knew from up there they use the park and the park system.
Right. I think that might be all the questions I have. I mean, is there anything else that you guys can think of that you want to be sure gets there that I've left out or haven't asked about?
Not that I can think of.
I know, when the Linwood plant was built, again, being on the lakefront, there was a lot of thought and consideration at the time when it was designed to be a public space. And because of its proximity on the lakefront, they actually had fairly elaborate landscaping plans, like reflecting pools and quiet spots for people to walk around and sit on the outside. Because it's a fairly large, it's 25 acres, and there was some fairly large open grassy areas. And I think there was a thought at the time, again, you got to remember this is the 1930s, that this would be a public space. There was also a lot of consideration given for its design, its neo-Gothic look, and a lot of effort went into light fixtures and everything else, again, to make sure it considered that this was a public space and it needed to be attractive. And it wasn't until World War II broke out that fences went up. And then, of course, that changed how, critical infrastructure was viewed. That while, it is public access, we still have a responsibility to keeping it safe and secure so that it, can run without being interrupted. But it was, an interesting thought that back in the day, you know, a lot of these locations on the lakefront were open more or less to the public. If you look at some of the original North Point photos, there's no fencing around it.
Right.
So,
This is just speculation. I don't know if this, by our Riverside pumping station, used to be what would be compared to like water parks now. And it's an area called Caesar's Pool. And those were public swimming areas. And I don't know if it's because as the Milwaukee River became polluted, that in turn those areas closed. And I believe that's may have been when they migrated to Bradford Beach in that area. And those areas that were swimming areas on the Milwaukee River were closed. When you see the old pictures of those areas, they were quite large establishments.
on the river.
On the river.
For beach clubs.
And beach clubs
Yeah.
and things like that. And the river water would have been warmer than
Right.
the lake water, which would have attracted people as opposed to the lake.
Yeah, John Gerda talked about that really a lot of the development back in the day was on the riverfront. Again, because you weren't prone to the storms, you didn't have the cold water, you know, Lake Michigan could be in the 40s in the middle of summer, depending on wind conditions. So a lot of development went into the river until the river became so polluted, you know, that the lakes became a little more popular because they were less polluted, but the water's so cold. And, you know, if you've been along the lakefront in the spring, you can see the impact the lake has on the climate right along the riverfront, or the lakefront, excuse me, because when the ground warms up, it creates a lake breeze. And so, you know, half a mile inland, blocks inland, it can be 70, 80 degrees, yet 60 degrees right at the beach because of the lake effect.
I started my day over at Howard today. It's almost hot over there. When I drove over to Home Bridge, and you hit that nice cool breeze, and it's nice and comfortable down here. I mean, it's not hot at all.
And it's a classic spring phenomenon. Most people get, you know, when we have a nice spring warm day, they want to come to the lakefront, and then they get here and it's cold. And you see people all the time, you know, coming in their swimsuits thinking it's going to be a nice day at the beach, and it's cold. In fact, sometimes we'll get fog, you know, along the lakefront because of the dew point and the air temperatures are similar because it's so cold. And that usually doesn't change until right around this time of year when we stop getting these southeast or northeast winds. When you get a south or a west wind, then you don't develop a lake breeze. And the lake starts to warm up. And as it starts warming up, then you don't have that contrast and you don't create the lake effect. So it is interesting. And it does create some problems for us from an operating standpoint. As a utility, you know, we need access in and out of the lakefront to go to our facilities, North Point here, and then Linwood up the street. And of course, because everybody wants to be at the lakefront, it gets saturated, and then that creates, you know, problems for us to gain access for our staff. So we have to work with local police and the county to make sure at all times they're able to keep our staff, give them the ability to move back and forth and get in and out. And if we have people that need to come to do work or repair, or because we're a 24/7 operation, you know, on the fireworks, this whole lakefront gets shut down. You can't drive on Lincoln Memorial because it becomes saturated, you know, with pedestrians and traffic. But our staff still has to get over to Linwood plant, so we have arrangements with all the sheriff and the police for site access. Same with here. They'll shut down Water Tower Road. You know, you can't go in and out of here. Or our guys still need to come here and do station checks and keep an eye on the place. So that creates a little bit of a challenge for us. But I think we all love the fact that we get to work on the lakefront and feel very blessed and lucky, you know, to have jobs like that where we get to see this every day, you know, day in and day out. People go out of their ways to come down here to see this, and we see it every day.
Yeah, they come down here whether it's to exercise or just walk along the lakefront. As the weather changes, you can watch, you know, progressively the smaller numbers of people in winter. But even in the winter, people are down here using it. And as you hit the 80 degrees and then into the 90s, you can barely move on Lincoln Memorial with the crowds of people that come down there. It's a huge attraction for people, especially in the hot weather.
You know, we're sensitive to the fact too that we have facilities on the lakefront that we have to keep up and maintain. So whenever we do something, you know, we're always reviewing that with, you know, like the aldermen and things like that, so they understand. You know, U.S. Cellular putting a cell site here. There was a lot of angst that went into how was that going to be located on the building. It was originally a lattice tower, but that was deemed to be too ugly and an eyesore when you were up on the bluff looking east to see this lattice tower coming off of this station. So if you look now, it's just a big pipe, basically. And all the cellular antennas are within it. So you really don't see it. It's not quite as obtrusive. It's a little less upsetting to the view. So, I mean, a lot of what we do on here, and we have a pretty good sized property right here on the lakefront, is to try to maintain it and keep it in good shape and, keep it well mowed and groomed. And so,
And it's not just our pumping station, the water tower, the park, and the fountain up by there, and some of this park area on the lakefront is our property. So we make sure it's mowed and taken care of. Any garbage is picked up, as part of the community.
and the fountain and the tower, we know the local community that's a green spot for them, for gathering and to walk. And so we get calls about graffiti, we have to maintain it. We remove it and clean it up, and John's staff maintains the fountain, and people throw things in there, and they throw soap in there. And, so we got to respond to all those things. And again, it's got nothing to do with water treatment, which is our core function, but we also know we have this responsibility to maintain our properties.
With the age of the fountain, some of the concrete work had started to say, so this year we had it mud jacked, and it looks very nice now. The company did a very nice job, and it's looking nice again.
Fix the railings, things like that.
So the water tower and the fountain up on the bluff, those are still both property.
Those are our parks. As well as Kilbourne Park, which used to be a reservoir straight west of here. It's no longer a reservoir in use, but it's a park that we maintain.
Is that the one that North Avenue circles around?
Yes.
Okay.
With
It
the
used to
veteran
be-
star on it, the side of it.
It used to be the reservoir, and then we decommissioned it because we no longer needed it. It was turned into a park, and so we maintained that park. There's some historical stuff sitting on site that we needed to keep, and again, we did that all through a huge effort with the local neighborhood communities, River West neighborhood, the alderpersons at the time, and at a considerable expense. It all came out of waterworks funds, and we maintain it all as well, even though it really has nothing to do anymore with water treatment. It's still our property, and we try to maintain it. People pull permits. We're doing a battery check. It's like they're doing a battery check. So it's going to run out there. So, what was I going to say? Kilbourne Park, right. Oh, both this location and Kilbourne, we get a lot of requests for people who want to use the space. And so they submit and apply permits through the DPW, through the city. And then we review it to see if it's going to have any impacts on us. Green market, there's dance activities, there's a volleyball tournament, all these things get weddings, yep. And then, so, we try to make sure it's well maintained for when those things come up. And then they have responsibilities too, but there's still a public need for the spaces.
UWM had a recent dance recital or performance up by the water tower.
Have you noticed a significant increase in people?
Do you want to step out? She's got Cheryl in the back. It's okay. I didn't know how bad that was going to be.
I couldn't really do that much, but have you noticed a big increase in the number of people coming to Bradford Beach during the summer?
Oh yeah, big increase. I've been coming back and forth through here since 1986, on and off. And the way the beach is being managed now and maintained, and putting in the first they added the nice, they made the North Point snack bar nice, and then they, got a good, and Altera, and then they put in the Beach House restaurant in Bradford, and then they added these tiki huts, or whatever you want to call them.
It's become pavilion and the paddle boats and everything. It's definitely, it's always been used, but it's used a lot more now than it had been in the
It
past.
used to be an afterthought. Now it's the place to go.
That's
I mean, you can see when the temperatures warm up, how much the younger, college students and high school students are all using it. My kids came down to Bradford Beach a lot, and that never used to happen. You never used to see tons and tons of kids down here. And I know on the evening hours when it gets really hot, it gets really crowded down here. And I know from hearing from our staff, it can be a real problem. First couple warm days of the year, and you can see it by the county's sheriff's response. The other day I drove down Lincoln Memorial, and they had their command center set up at North Point. I saw 3 horsebacks. I saw 4 SUVs. This is all county sheriff. 3 motorcycle officers, about 6 bicycle officers. So that tells you it's being used. And if there's a police presence to that level, they're here to try to maintain some order, because it must get out of order.
And keep the traffic moving. And
We get, in the wintertime, North Point Hill gets used for sledding. And so we have to accommodate for that too. We put hay bales in front of the trees so that hopefully people don't slide into the trees. But the first snowfalls we get, that lake, the whole hillside will be full of people sledding. And then they leave all their garbage. So we have to go up there and pick up beer bottles and garbage, and people just leave laying around food. So, it's just part of life along the lakefront. But it has gotten so much more popular, Bradford Beach.
And the county provides us with a schedule of all the main events that are happening all summer long, so we can plan around it.
Yes.
But in addition to that, just the lakefront itself attracts a lot of people. I mean, it's a very nice place to come to.
Do you think the police presence there is because they just want to keep order, or do you think that they're worried about either drugs or violence or something like that?
My own opinion would be to keep the order and to make sure what you just described gets kept to a minimum. They want to make a presence to say, fine, you can come down here, have a good time, but you better behave yourself or else. And there have been problems. I've actually personally been up and down Lincoln Memorial on some really hot days and was stuck in traffic that was backed up all the way past North Point, where you couldn't even go southbound anymore on Lincoln Memorial, and it was just a parking lot. Lincoln Memorial was a parking lot. Nobody was moving. And I had 2 younger kids at the time, and they were rolling up the windows because all around us were people in their cars jumping up and down, hanging out the windows, thumping their music. So it was a little intimidating to the kids. And
Some part of their, and that's just them being here helps with the traffic. In addition, there's always, when you have large groups of people, you'll have some other problems. But keeping a presence and traffic flowing,
and Lincoln Memorial only has a couple of outlets. You can gain access from Kenwood, Ravine Road, Water Tower Road, this road here, Lafayette Hill, and then when you're downtown. So it kind of is landlocked, and it doesn't give you a lot of outlets. And when they redid Lincoln Memorial Drive, they put in the boulevard that separates now the northbound and southbound lanes, and that's kind of contributed to just that you can't go. Before, you used to be able to turn around. Now there's only, at those intersections, can you turn around.
or
So-
to the top of the hill.
Well, what they'll do is they'll shut down, the access roads when they become saturated, and then you can't get out, except they're all funneling you to the south. And so it used to be, Lincoln Memorial didn't have the boulevard, and if you got into heavy traffic, well, you could turn around and then go northbound and get out that way. It tends to be the heavier traffic is all heading southbound on Lincoln Memorial. So, redoing Lincoln Memorial made it more attractive, but didn't necessarily make it more conducive to moving people in and out of it. So, which is a problem for us at the end of the day for our staff trying to get out of Linwood. Getting out of Linwood at 3:30 in the afternoon, depending on the day, can be very trying because of the sheer volume of traffic going up and down Lincoln Memorial. So many days the only choice you have is to go northbound and turn right out of Lincoln on Lincoln Memorial and just go out that way. A lot of people live to the south, so they want to cross over and take the southbound lanes, but there are some days you'll be sitting there for 10 minutes and you won't move. So you gotta turn right just to get out. So,
And then people will either go over to the freeway or go through the neighborhoods on the top of the hill.
but it's all a good thing because this means the lakefront's getting used, and that's what it's here for, right? Public access, and Milwaukee has gone out of its way to not develop the lakefront, to keep it park-like, developing park-like development, not residential or commercial development. Again, this whole trying to keep public access to the lakes. That is probably one of the things that's attractive to Milwaukee, but it has been challenging for us because of that. If they were to develop more, probably it'd be more challenging. If they were to add more infrastructure, you kind of go, where would they put it? Because all this is sitting east of the bluff, which is all man-made, right? The shoreline went right up to the bluff. So there's only so much you can tolerate here, right? And then you're going to get saturation all the time. So probably a little bit of quandary. But I personally would wish they did more along the lakefront like they do in Chicago. I mean, if you look at Navy Pier, it's open 24 hours, it's open year-round.
Right.
And I always thought, why couldn't they do more with Summerfest to make that a year-round venue or year-round restaurants that you can go to? Because that whole Third Ward area, and they got that new Peninsula Park there, and excuse me, that there's so much growth, that could be done there. But
They are increasing, but I don't think they've hit a point that they can do a lot more. I feel there's the potential.
if you were to have year-round restaurants on the Summerfest property, that would still be fun places to go to with views of the lake, that would be part of Summerfest when Summerfest is going on, but that the rest of the time when it's not a festival weekend, is still a destination place to go. I mean, think about every place you go. The best restaurant in the city is the Harbor House, sitting right on the lake. Everybody loves that view. Lake Park Bistro, which is right up the hill. Everybody loves the view. It's again a high-end restaurant, well-maintained, well-run, but it's got location.
The hamburger stand across the street.
That place gets packed. That never used to be packed.
And now you have the 3 cabanas on the beach, and I hear the food's really good there too.
Yeah.
And think of the view you have from there.
It makes it a destination, a place to go. You've got something to do, So, while on one hand I like it as a city resident to have all that to do, as a waterworks guy, it's just a headache. But it goes with the territory, And I'm glad that when there's things that make this more attractive to the city, because that's good for us as citizens of the city and as employees of the city.
Do you think most of the people that go to Brentford Beach are kids, or at least younger people?
It seems that way. I don't know. I've never really done it.
I think it also depends on time of day.
Right.
Earlier in the day, actually early in the morning when I used to drive over to Linwood and drive along the lakefront as I was going there, you'd see older people who walk, and you'd see joggers who aren't real young people. The young people come later in the day.
That's right.
The lakefront is used not in crowds, but as a place to exercise by an older crowd early in the morning. I mean, even when it's still dark out, you'll see people jogging, walking, and exercising along the lakefront. I mean, I'd be driving along here at 6:30 in the morning. It's dark out on a winter day, and there's people who are jogging, except on the worst of days that, a blizzard or ice storm or something like that. But all winter long, people use it in the dark.
Right. And John's point is valid. The late afternoon, that's when the younger crowd shows up. But you do see it being used throughout the day, and it does vary.
And I think it's also what area you're at. The Bradford Beach is all primarily young people. My wife and I are in our 50s, we'll come down here and go to Filled Landfill over by the War Memorial and go for walks around there any
Right.
time of day, afternoon, and that, if you see people walking and using that area, that's probably an older crowd, you know.
Over by the Discovery Museum in that
over
area.
by the Discovery Museum.
Right.
And, you know, come down, walk ourselves or walk our dogs and things, and there'll be a lot of other people there too. So I think part of it's location oriented. And if you look at the design of the lakefront, when they designed even Bradford Beach, they put a little cove over to the side here, and I believe that cove was designed more for people with young children to go swimming over there because it has a rock seawall almost to stop the large waves from coming in.
That's an area just north of McKinley Marina. Yeah, right. And you know, they've done a lot of things to, you know, take care of the beaches. You know, back in the day, these beaches were full of, you know, alewives and just trash that would come ashore from sewer overflows. The Deep Tunnel Project has eliminated so much of that. And now they've got, you know, we used to have 50 or 60 overflows from sewage a year, but when they put the deep tunnels in the 90s, you know, they basically wiped that down to a couple times a year. I mean, it's still not perfect, but it significantly improved the water quality and the beach's quality. And I know Milwaukee Health Department has a very elaborate beach water quality monitoring program. If you've ever been on Bradford Beach, you'll see those little flags. They're placards, and they'll put red up for warnings or green if it's good. They pretty much, when there's a storm event, they'll have to put up something knowing historically that within a day or so after a major rain event, you're going to probably have higher bacteria counts on the beach. But you don't see that like you used to. It seems like, you know, a lot of things that have been done to improve the water quality of the lake have made it more attractive to be on the beach. You know, you're not getting the garbage and the litter and
In addition
the
to
dead
that,
fish.
you'll
They
see-
beach comb it.
The county on a regular basis has a gentleman who will come rake the beach with a piece of equipment, and it's done on a regular basis.
He's there every day, you know, crack of dawn. I mean, he's up when I'm driving in at 6 o'clock. He's home at the beach already. So, county's done a good job.
Right, and as well as I think occasionally there's volunteer groups that help with cleanup, as well as the county does a lot of work themselves, keeping the beach clean and the lake
Well,
parks.
they added all those volleyball, beach volleyball.
Another thing that, we do a lot of business with contractors, and one of the contractors that was here to talk to me the one day, he was from the Lake Superior area, and he was amazed. He thought his daughter would love coming to Milwaukee because she loves beach volleyball, and he was amazed driving up the lakefront to come to the plant and seeing how we endorse beach volleyball and how that's set up there. I mean,
The North Point station was built in the 1880s. Is that right?
Well, according to the brochure I was just looking at, it was actually earlier than that. Again, you have that handout I gave you from the North Point Station history. So it was approved by the state in 1871 to give Milwaukee the authority to construct a waterworks to use for fire protection. And they created a water commission and had their first meeting in April 18th of 1871. And they began construction in 1872 of a pumping station on the lakeshore, North Point, containing 2 steam pumping engines of 8 million gallons per day, a raw water intake, a standpipe, that was North Point Tower, a reservoir, Kilburn Reservoir, and a 50 miles of water distribution mains ranging in size from 6 to 36 inches in diameter. And they said that the Kilburn Reservoir was actually constructed before the North Point pumping station was ready. So they actually had another pumping station on 10th and North that used to pump river water into the Kilburn Reservoir. And that was the first distribution of water in the Milwaukee area.
was that other picture you had shown?
Yes, right. So they're saying in 1874, the North Point station commenced pumping untreated lake water into the distribution system. So the temporary plant on the river was abandoned. And so they would use the water height in the reservoir to maintain the pressure and the flow The pumps here would only kick on to keep the water reservoir full. And so it would sometimes run just occasionally, so.
So this station was built about 20 years before Lake Park was designed. So this was really the first.
1873, 1874, right?
This was really like the first green park space along the lake for this neighborhood.
That sounds about right, yeah. When you look at, that old photo, I mean, there's horses, and it was a sketching from back in the day. And I know we have some photos of, cows up here around North Point Tower when they first put it in. So, I mean, this wasn't a very well-developed area. Lake Park went into service when?
Late 1890s, I think.
Okay.
That's all I have for you gentlemen, unless you have something else.
I'm done rambling.
All right, well, thank you very much.